Welcome, everybody, to another edition of CPG Insiders. I'm your host, Mark Young, with my co-host, the Robin to my Batman, Justin Gerard. How's it going, Robin? I don't see the tights on today.
I got it under here. It's ready to go when I have to jump into action.
So you wear it under your regular clothes.
Exactly.
Superman did that too, I think, didn't he?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense then. That tracks.
Strategic.
So we're gonna have a conversation with one of my dear friends who's been on the podcast many times. For those of you that listened to us before, David Biernbaum. Now, David, the best way I can introduce David is to tell people David has forgotten more about the CPG industry than most people know about the CPG industry.
Amen.
So I'm not even going to get into how many years he's been in it, but I'm going to tell you it's many decades.
I lost count anyway.
Many decades working for some of the biggest brands in the world and working for some of the startup brands in the world. And we're going to talk a little bit about ECRM. Now, Justin, you and I have this experience. So I'm going to lay this out and then we'll let David comment on it. You and I run into brands all the time that a couple things happen. One, they've either got a booth set, they got a room at ECRM, and they're going to present. Mm-hmm. And we talk to them and say, okay, these people are going to want to see the marketing plan. Well, we don't, we're going to do some social media. We're going to we're going to do a viral video. Yeah. Because it's so easy to do a viral video, isn't it? You just get your phone out, shoot video, and it becomes millions of people watch it.
Yeah. Or
it's
something they're going to think about afterwards, right? Like they don't have to worry about that right now. They'll figure that out.
Yeah, and you and I try explaining to people something, and that is, one, when you spend 20 minutes with a buyer, about 15 minutes of it's going to be the buyer's going to want to spend 15 minutes finding out how you're going to drive people into his store to buy this thing.
Yep.
The second thing is there's 148,000 different SKUs in a Walmart supercenter. So if your plan is that I'm going to be the one over 148,000 that everyone stops and reads the package on, you're not dealing with reality.
No.
The third thing is, and I'm interested to get David to weigh in on this, you've got about 60 to 90 days to hit a Mendoza line, or you're already being looked at as a place to cut.
And again, remember, for our audience, Mendoza line means a sales goal. For all of you guys that have not heard that term from Mark before, that's the minimum sales goal. So you got to hit that thing out the gate, or you're ready in for some really tough conversations.
And Mendoza line comes from the world of baseball, where it was determined there was a certain player by the name of Mendoza, and they determined he had the exact minimum batting average of what it took to stay on the team. So in baseball, it's what's the batting average you have to not get kicked off the team. Mm-hmm. In retail, the Mendoza line is what's the weekly units per week per store that you need to have to not be kicked off the team. Yep. It's the same thing. Anyways, David, welcome to CPG Insiders. Great to have you back, buddy.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you guys, as always.
So what do you think of what we were just talking about?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that you and I, your team, and I have had so many success stories in retail that go back too many years that I've even lost count. Mm-hmm. But I know this. I walked around one day. I think it was a Walgreens store, maybe it was a CVS. I walked around the store and literally counted about 200 SKUs that you and I have had something to do with, going all the way back to the beginning, either you or I or you and I.
They're on every shelf.
They're on every shelf, and my goodness, in all different kinds of categories. So what you said, is a great start. I want to say, first of all, that, ECRM provides the very, very best opportunity and the best platform by far of any of the trade organizations to give a new product, a new company, an entrepreneur, even an established company who has new products.
Yeah, and we're
Um,
big supporters of ECRM. And folks, you may also know ECRM from their other name, which is RangeMate,
yeah,
because that's the same operation.
yeah, it's now the best uh, technology available in the consumer products industry, and more retailers are relying on it. I, hear
Hmm.
that every day.
Yeah,
So,
Kroger requires you to be in RangeMate to even
oh,
be in Kroger.
yeah, and if you're a retailer, you could really understand why that's such a valuable tool. Um, it makes life a lot easier for you as a retailer because everything is right there, including, by the way, your marketing plan if you're a product. So, ECRM provides really just a tremendous forum and opportunity. And I've lost count of how many I've been to, but whenever I go, they put the number of ECRMs you've been to on your badge. And I don't know, I think I'm up almost over 100.
I was going to say, yours looks more like a social security number at this point.
Well, this, just a trivial thing. I was at the very first one when Charlie Bolus first started the concept. Charlie was actually he was the founder, by the way. He was
Hmm.
actually a buyer at a company called Boston Distributors in Cleveland. And he was a buyer that I called on and that I did business with. And I remember, I was one of probably 100 people he probably ran this idea by when he was starting to put together ECRM. And, I thought it was one of those things, it's too good to be true. You know, you're going to give all these new companies in new products 20 minutes with buyers when the hardest thing for these companies is to even get an initial appointment with major retailers. But now, you're gonna pay a fee and you're gonna go and you're gonna talk to about 40 of these companies in the course of 4 days at a beautiful resort somewhere. And Charlie's ECRM is going to give you, they're going to tear down or they're going to kind of rip apart a hotel room for you. It won't have a bed in it. All the furniture will be gone. And it's going to be your room to present. And what could be better than that? I mean, that's so much better than a booth at a trade show where you're one of like 2,000 of them and you've got 10 feet to cram everything in, including your samples and your displays and your products. And I really love the format of Meet the Market at NACDS and GMDC. That's probably the second best format where you go table to table and you make your presentation maybe in 12 minutes. And at least you get to see a lot of different retailers. But the best by far is having this hotel room because hotel rooms are bigger than you think when everything is out of there, and you can really for the most part choreograph or you can design the whole room to be your presentation for your products and your company. So you could put, poster boards all over the place. You could put product displays, everywhere. You can very methodically walk through the room yourself as though you're a buyer and put everything in a very logical order that you want them to see and in the right places. And of course, you're going to have a presentation on a PC or a bigger screen.
Yeah,
So
and it's so much more intimate too because you're not in the middle
yeah,
of a big room with 1,000 people walking around. You're trying to hold a conversation.
well, and they have such a good staff. I have I've made so many friends over the years with people that worked at ECRM over the years, and I've gone to weddings and bar mitzvahs and all kinds of things of people that work there, and some of the young people that were there when I first started, um, they're almost my age, so it's really a great organization, and they've got a
I know,
great
David, do you remember when we were the young startup guys?
yeah. Yeah, that's starting to become a long time ago. But They've got a great
Hmm.
CEO in Greg Farr, who had a Nielsen background, which is, terrific. They've got really great people with unbelievable backgrounds. Wayne Bennett, who used to be the publisher or the editor of Drugstore News. Lisa Calero, who's been there since the very, very beginning. Um, Tony and they've got Joe, who does videos with the participants. They've just got from top to bottom. They've got great people, and all the way to the young people who sit in the hallway and come knock on your door and tell you you've got 3 minutes left, and make sure that your your systems are working, your technology is working. They've just thought of it all, and whereas Charlie really invented all this and deserves credit for putting it together. Greg and his team have just done a phenomenal job of adding technology. They go through great pain starting weeks and weeks before your event, and they have a staff that helps you uh, as a company, as a supplier, to learn how to use their system, their technology, RangeMe, and everything else. And they tell you what their perception of what the retailers are looking for and how to put your time together. All that said, there's one thing that they really can't, they're not really in a position to tell um, the participants. Whereas, Mark, you are in a tremendous position to educate people that are going to ECRM, and mostly people that are already there, is that you have, if you're a supplier, you have a product, you're a new company, along with all the other essentials that you need to present, you really need to be able to lay out a basic marketing plan. And the reason for that, think of yourself as a retailer attending this event. You're going to see 50 or 60 different new companies while you're there. You're going to see some established companies where you're going to be doing category reviews. But you're going to see so many companies, so many products. Now, you're going to see most of the products you're going to see you've never seen before. Some of the innovations you're going to see are tremendous. Wow, that's a really cool product. But I'm a retailer. I'm risk avoidant. I'll lose my job as a buyer if I put something on the shelf that doesn't sell, and heaven forbid I can't get my money back, after it dies or doesn't sell. That's how I lose my job.
And let me add something to that for a minute,
Yeah.
David. I want to remind people of something of the Harvard study that we've discussed here before. And that study shows that there's about 45,000 new SKUs introduced into the market every year. Of that 45,000, only 15% of them are still on the shelf 24 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And of the 15%, nearly 90% of those belong to an existing brand. That, it's like Tide as a new unit, or even somebody with 5 SKUs goes to 6 SKUs. So when we're looking at one single SKU, first time entrepreneurial consumer
Mm-hmm.
packaged goods, the odds of staying on the shelf is, I'd have to do the math, but it's like 150 over 45,000.
Yeah.
So when you're the buyer, understand the buyer knows that mathematically the odds are in his favor or her favor that you will fail.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so much easier and safer to say no than it is to say yes.
And buyers, of course, entrepreneurs ask me a lot of really the same questions all the time. And one of the things they will always want to discuss is they'll say, how come the retailers, whether it's CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, or whoever, why do they always load up their shelves with items from Procter and Gamble and Colgate, Johnson and Johnson, depending on the category,
Mm-hmm.
L'Oreal, whatever? Why do they do that? Well, the answer is really easy. They do that because they're low risk, because they know that those type of consumer product companies already have a systemic plan to move product off the shelf. So it's very low risk.
And they know
Uh,
even if the product fails, those companies are big enough to swap it out and give them their money back or give them more of another product.
yeah, so I'm never going to get fired as a buyer for putting in another SKU or another flavor or another color or another size of a P&G item. It's just like almost no risk at all.
Well, sure.
The
Look how
odds are like,
everybody went both feet into Coke. What was it? New Coke.
mm-hmm,
It was a flaming failure, but everybody had it because
Yep.
it's Coke.
it's Coke. And they didn't get stuck with it. Coke took
No.
care of it at the end and replaced it all with something
Right.
else.
Because they're big
So,
enough to make good on it if it fails.
yeah, so very few clients that you or I have will ever have, the budget, that a P&G has on advertising. However, retailers aren't necessarily looking for a match in the spend. They're looking for a plan. And like I always train my clients to say is that, because retailers always ask you, what's your spend? How much money are you going to be spending on your ad plan? Well, you shouldn't be punished for buying value, so you
But you
might
will
spend.
get punished for not spending the right percentage.
That's exactly right. And so there's two different general kinds of marketing and advertising. Number one, and these are real general, but number one is the external advertising and marketing that you do, what you do to bring consumers to the shelf. The other part of it is you need to participate in the retailer's own advertising programs. And, it's so important before you go to ECRM. Get somebody that really knows the industry and the retailers to advise you and, sit down with them over a very long cup of coffee and find out what you need to know about each specific retailer, because no two are really the same. They all have slightly different business models, believe it or not. They have different end result objectives and goals. They go about their business all in different ways. And one of the turnoffs that any retailer has, whether it's ECRM or NACDS or GMDC or whatever, is when the new company sits down and says, "Tell me about your retail chain." Like, you got to be kidding. We we get 20 minutes and you don't know anything about my business. Well, we don't have any in the city that I live in. Okay, this is when they start looking at their watch. You need to know all that. And if or you can have somebody with you that knows all those things, and that's fine too. But know not just how many stores and where their headquarters is, and uh, you know, you need to know. You need to know, how do they promote their own retail chain? How do they advertise? And how do they advertise the products that are on the shelf, which of course is called co-op advertising. But in addition, that's a give me. But in addition to that, you need to lay out the rest of the plan. Now, advertising and marketing today is complicated because it's chopped up and divided into so many different types of marketing and advertising. In the old days, it was television, almost period. It was TV, it was radio, print advertising. And those things are still around and they're still extremely important. But digital marketing and advertising now is a big piece of it. But that too, you need somebody like yourself, Mark Young, to sit down with you at an ECRM or in the lobby and advise you what kind of marketing and advertising to put on your tentative plan. Because really, for some types of brands, digital advertising is really what you need, and maybe all that you need. Maybe your game plan is to build your business up digitally for 18 months and then take that consumer base to the retailer. Maybe it's to start with retailer. Um, we know that digital advertising is mostly geared for click now and buy it. So it sends a lot of business to Amazon or to your own e-commerce site. It's a little bit more difficult, although you guys know how to make it happen, but it's a little bit more difficult to digitally advertise and get people to go into the car, turn on the motor, and go drive to CVS and buy the product when the consumer really wants to buy it right now if you get them interested. But that works for some brands in some categories in some situations. If your main business is going to be brick and mortar, which really most brands still are, they need to talk to somebody with like your experience and your background as to what do you imagine that would be? Will I be doing some ads on terrestrial TV, or will I be doing some advertising on streaming, cable news? There's so many different avenues and possibilities. Radio, there's Sirius Radio, there's AM, there's FM, there's podcasts, which are so incredibly prominent right now. So the list goes on and on of all the different possibilities. And I would say in the first 5 minutes to anybody that's preparing to go to ECRM is that you need to sit down with somebody like Mark Young, who's an author, has written books, has given so many lectures, and has had countless numbers of success stories with new brands on how do I lay that out? Because the truth is, you really, you're the new client, you've got new products, you really don't know how to do it. There's no way you can know how to do it, unless you've done it many, many times before. And most people who attend ECRM have never done it. Or they've tried and failed, or they have great products, but they really don't know how to sit down and tell a retailer how they're going to move it off the shelf. Now, retailers aren't going to sit down and tell you how to do it. They haven't put all the diligence into thinking about how to market your brand or your product. They can't.
They don't have time to. They've got too many brands to deal with.
No, they don't want to. They don't have to. They just want to avoid the risk. And so that's what you need to have laid out. And I will tell you, I've been to so many ECRM meetings with so many clients. Now, of course, if they're my client, they're going to have all that ready. But I've sat in a lot of meetings where they're not necessarily my client. And, entrepreneurs know all about their product. They know the features, they know the benefits, they know the science. And they could talk about those things forever, much better than I can, much better than a retailer will ever understand or want to know. They know their cost, their pricing, and all those type of parameters. They know their case packs, they know the specifications and all those types of things. What they don't know is how they're going to move the product off the shelf. The typical presentation of a new company and how they're going to move product off the shelf is usually something like, well, there's no other product like this, or it doesn't have a lot of competition, or, this is so innovative. Yeah, right. But again, there's thousands of different SKUs in any given store, even in an aisle, even in the category.
I always go back to a meeting I had with a buyer where the client and the broker were pitching how well the product worked. And the buyer looked over her glasses and looked at him and says, "Do you think people come in here and tell me their product doesn't work? I assume the product does what it says.
Well, it's
You
How
know
are
what,
you
Mark?
going to get people to buy it?"
it's interesting.
And you know what, Mark and Justin, I'll be as candid as and transparent about this as I can possibly be. There's a lot of mediocre products in the
There is.
store
Yeah.
on the shelves that are doing well
Mhm.
because they're marketed well. I'm not going to say Procter and Gamble's products are mediocre. They're not. They're good. But Procter and Gamble is an example of a company that rarely innovates new items. They usually buy
Mhm.
established items from entrepreneurial companies who reached a certain peak, and then they become
Yeah, a
P&G
new
items.
item for Procter and Gamble is, Tide's now in a drip-free bottle.
Yeah,
That's
right.
innovation for them.
It is, and so the point is that some of the most innovative and most fabulous products that I've ever seen never make it to the shelf. And if they do make it to the shelf, they're not there for long because there weren't enough consumers that shopped there that knew about it before they got there. And guess what? They didn't notice it when they were there.
Yep. Well,
So that's
and
where,
David,
you
you
know,
bring
I'm
up
I'm
a
gonna
great
reach
point.
I'm gonna reach some of the people I know at ECRM, and I'm really gonna make a recommendation, Mark. I don't mean to put you on a spot, but I'm actually gonna make a recommendation that somehow, some way, they should really involve you in the process because there is nobody in the consumer products industry. I don't care how big the ad agencies are. In fact, the bigger the worse, really. Um, there's no company, there's no person who has successfully launched the kind of items that come to ECRM more than you have for as many years and with the success that you have. And even if these people never become your clients, and and I know most of them won't, but they need to sit down with you or sit down and listen to you speak or to have you join their meeting so that you could guide them into having that marketing, advertising, general plan ready to present. Because if you do that successfully as a new company, your chances of getting a chance, of getting distribution, of getting on the shelf, I'm not exaggerating, are 1,000 times greater than if you don't have that when
Well,
you're
it's
in the
very
meeting.
kind of you to say that, David. And here's the reality. And Justin and I are happy to talk to people whether they become a
Mm-hmm.
client or not.
Mhm.
I know you are.
We just like you, we love the industry. We want to help people, but people pay the price for not knowing what they don't know
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
unless you've been at this for a long time. And David, I'm going to tell you another thing that we see. And I know you've seen this. Now you're kind of a unique individual because you've been with P&G and you've been with these big companies, but you've launched startups.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we will see companies got a new product, new company, new product, and they go recruit somebody who was, on the B string or the
Oh,
C
yeah.
string at a major brand.
Mm-hmm.
So they get somebody who was, assistant brand champion for Campbell Soup, and they make them the head of marketing,
Right.
and it fails miserably. And the reason it fails in my mind is when you're Campbell Soup, you're a category captain.
Mm-hmm.
You control what, 6 feet of shelf, 8 feet of shelf.
Yes.
You have no experience going in and begging for 3 inches of shelf space.
Yep.
Your experience is, I'm Campbell's freaking Soup. I can put whatever I want on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you've got a buyer saying, well, I don't care what you have. You're not Campbell's Soup today.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mark,
So what's been your experience? Do those people, do you
Yeah,
see
well,
those
I'll
types
give you a
failing?
personal example. I grew up in the Gillette company in Procter and Gamble, and
Hmm.
I worked for Smith Kline Beecham, and people were really nice to me all the time when we'd exchange business cards. And oh, you've got this title or that title with Gillette, and oh my goodness, it was easy to get them out to dinner, and we were just instant friends. They want to pick my brain, and it was just a wonderful situation. When I left the big corporate world and started my own business and started working with entrepreneurial brands, and it just said David Biernbaum on my card back then, and it didn't have the Gillette logo or it didn't have the P&G logo. My feelings were hurt.
Yeah, because so many
Nobody
people
really
forgot
cared
who
as
you
much
were.
anymore. So that's the real world. And, those companies are real popular with retailers for a really good reason. And that is that, those are can't lose propositions when you put those products on the shelf. We were talking before, though, about how some of the very best items that I've ever seen, you know, um, they didn't have you, they didn't have me, they didn't get on the shelf. And if they did get on the shelf, like you said earlier, they were only there for a year or even less because there was no movement. Um, so it is just, I can't emphasize enough. Not only do you need to have that, but you need to have it. It needs to make sense to the retailer, and it needs to look professional. Even if it's informal, it needs to look professional. It needs to look like you and somebody on your team or somebody that you're sourcing or outsourcing knows what the hell they're doing. Because this industry is too easy to fail in.
Mhm.
And for
It
new
is. Although
brands,
it's a great place where fortunes are made too.
fortunes are made all the time in this industry, and that's really understated and underestimated. Um, I mean, think about it. If you're listening to this, walk through any store, walk through a Walmart, or a CVS or a Walgreens or Target, and just look at some of the most successful items in the store. Behind every one of those items, some people have made millions and billions.
Well, you look at one of our old clients, Cremo Shave Cream.
Yes,
Came to us when they were a single SKU, one SKU. They were, in fact, one SKU that was in risk of being delisted.
Yep.
5 years later, Edgewell bought the company for $300 million.
absolutely. And I promise you that had they not started out with Jekyll and Hyde, um, I would say are a similar agency, except for in my mind, there really aren't any. But had they not done that, they'd be a memory today.
They
A lot of
were,
people remember
you
them.
are
I mean,
correct. They were close to being delisted when they became a client.
and there's an example of they've got great products, really, really good products. I use them all the time. I love them.
Yeah, it is a good product. There's nothing wrong with the product.
But I
But the
will tell
problem is
you,
nobody knew why to buy it. Plus, it was a premium product, so why should I spend this extra money?
that's exactly right. And that's true of so many ECRM um, vendors that come to the event. Uh, you know what? If you could sit down in every one of these ECRM appointment meetings, you would probably go home and say, you know what? Probably 90% of them were good enough products to
Well,
be on retail shelves.
they all had a decent reason to be there.
Mhm.
They all do.
You brought up a
And
really good point too, David, and that is you need to know, you need to decide, one, you need to decide who you want to present to, not present to anybody that will show up,
that's right.
because you need to figure out where does my product belong and what's the order in which it should show up in these retailers.
That's right.
And then you need to know everything you can about that retailer and that buyer. Because as you
Absolutely.
said, everybody's different. I'm going to go to Kroger for a minute. Kroger, how's Kroger marketing? Well, they're marketing at food is medicine,
Hmm.
and how do they reduce the use of pharmaceuticals and improve people making healthier choices? So that's important for them. So how does your product talk to their goal, to their message? They're
That's
all
right.
different.
And that's so important. And, preparation, it goes without saying. The companies that do the best at ECRM are the ones that are the best prepared because, like we've said, almost everybody at ECRM has a pretty good product, at least good enough, to probably be on retail shelves.
But it's
What
not, here's our
separates the
pitch deck and we're going to replace the logo.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, companies need to be open-minded enough to listen to experts and be open-minded to making the changes or the tweaks that the experts know will make the product sell. I don't mean to be unkind to people, but you know, I see package designs that I already know the minute I see them that regardless of what's inside the product, this thing's not going to sell on the shelf or it's not going to get the right kind of attention. And you find out, somebody's husband or wife designed it or a cousin or, you know, my favorite is they put this on the internet where, people can design something for you and it's like a contest. And
Yeah,
if you choose theirs, you
$99
pay them.
design. I've seen packages, Dave. I'll give you some examples. I had one guy bring me a package. The package was a red font on green background.
Christmas.
Not only Christmas, but a colorblind
Yeah.
test for 1 out of 10 males.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for 1 out of 10 males, they can't see the printing. I had another one who brought us a product, and I've seen this more than once. They had the printing done in foil. Now it
Oh
looked really
no.
nice. Looked
Yeah.
really nice until we
If you're
explained to
holding it in
them.
your hand.
But we explained to them, let's go visit a Walmart where they have fluorescent lighting
Hmm.
and watch how you can no longer read your box now.
Hmm. It just
Because
has a
under the
glare.
fluorescent lighting, it just blows up.
Yeah. And there's so many situations like that. You know, let's face it, a lot of new products, new companies, they're looking for inexpensive ways to do everything. So uh, they're using the art you can buy on a from a Mac computer or something. I
Yep.
can't think of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
And what I always think is interesting is the biggest brands in the world,
hmm
the brands that have the money to actually build an in-house marketing department and an in-house ad agency and to hire talent, none of those brands run an inside ad agency. They all use outside agencies.
they sure do.
But the small brands, they think, well, we can do this internally. I've got my nephew and he knows how to make a website. And my,
Yeah,
my niece, my niece does graphic design, so she can do a package. And it's like, so why does the small brand think that they are capable of doing something that P&G's already determined doesn't work?
that's exactly right. Exactly. And, small brands would be surprised if they knew what gets outsourced with the big successful brands. That would shock them, really. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because the idea is that you're putting your best foot forward. And in order to do that and have the best chance for success, you're using experts, you're buying experience, you're buying the trial and error that's already occurred. Why would I say, well, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else. If that doesn't work, I'll try something else. When I can outsource somebody that already knows what's going to work and what isn't going to work.
And in brick and mortar, there may not be I'll try something else.
Yeah.
No, there isn't. So I really, like I said, I'm going to actually talk to Greg or some of the people at ECRM. This is really a void, and it's not ECRM's fault that it's a void. It's an industry thing. There's got to be better performance in the ECR meetings by the participants in laying out a plan. Now, typically a new company will say, well, I can't commit to that kind of budget right now. Well, you're not committing to anything. You're laying out a plan that you know in your mind that if it looks like you're going to get the distribution, you're going to turn on the plan. If for any reason you strike out and nobody's going to put your product in, you're obviously not going to buy a big advertising program. And a real good ad agency understands that and relates to that.
The flip side is, though, if you go tell that buyer you're going to throw the switch and you don't, which happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You now have no credibility with that buyer whatsoever.
No, and you can't wait. You can't wait until it's been on the shelf for 6 weeks to push the buttons.
Well, and you also,
first of all,
you need a partner.
Your sales performance begins the very second your product hits the shelf. Everything today is moving averages and market share and, IRI, Nielsen, POS. All those things matter the first second you're on the shelf. So the first second you're on the shelf is just as important as what the product does a year from now. And in some ways, even more important. So you have to have all this ready to go and ready to begin the minute it hits the shelf on a major retail account. If you don't, you can start counting the days that you haven't had enough sales already. That's already averaging in to your performance. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get like a company like yours involved before you start making presentations rather than wait until afterwards. There's really, there's always the cliche that no one size fits all, and that's really true.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you one thing that does fit all. If you're not 90% prepared before you sit down at your first meeting with a plan, your odds of getting distribution are very small. But if you're lucky enough to get distribution in, 62 stores in an 8,000 store chain or something, and get tested, that's going nowhere either. Today, there's all kinds of new challenges that, I've been doing this for, 40 something years now. I lose count. But everything changes all the time. But not as many things have ever changed as much as they did during and after the pandemic in terms of doing business with retailers. And you talk about all of them being different now. Some of the retailers don't even do appointments inside anymore. It's all on Zoom. So you talk about having to have things laid out. You better be able to do that. In fact, some of the ECRMs are on Zoom or something similar to Zoom. Some of them are in person now in the hotels, and some of them are still virtual.
I prefer in person.
Yeah, I certainly
I'm
do.
old school, but I like sharing space with someone and being able to build that relationship.
There's no question about it. But if you want to get into a major retail chain and they don't do it that way, and they do it all online, there's another whole approach to how to do that the right way, do it successfully. But even more than ever, your plan not only has to, it's not just putting on the table a plan, you have to be able to show the plan on Zoom in a way that's just as persuasive as when you're there in person. And there's so much, we could talk about that on a whole different podcast for hours,
You have to
about
meet.
which
You got to meet that buyer on their turf.
you have to meet them on their turf. Um, but that gets into, showing even some motion about how your plan's going to work, how they can view it as if it's already in place. What's it going to look like, really, would be the way that I would phrase that.
Yeah, because
Um,
buyers are still humans.
they really are. And even though AI might replace them eventually, I hope not, buyers. If you're listening to me, I was just kidding. Bad joke. It'll replace me before it replaces you. But this is just such an important add-on that I wish I could think of the words to not overstate this. If you don't go to ECRM with a plan on how you're going to move product off the shelf from day one, minute one, and then also how you're going to work with the retailer on their own programs. And by the way, if you're not going to work with their programs, they're not interested in you either. Because truth be known, a lot of their revenue that they count on for making any item profitable is by selling you their programs. Is that ideal? No. Is that necessarily the most profitable part of your business? No. Are their programs overpriced? Yes. Do you need to negotiate those programs with them? Yes, yes, and yes. But you need to do it. Because that's something they know for sure that the big companies will do with them and for them. So you need to have that on your plan as well. But you can't just say, you go back 10 years ago, the question the retailer would ask you is what's your spend?
Mm-hmm.
That was just kind of a trick question where they really wanted to know if you even thought about it, how you're going to do this.
Absolutely.
But
Well,
now you've
David,
got to be more specific than that.
really
And
appreciate you
especially
being with
now
us.
because what you're going to spend really isn't necessarily relevant. I mean, all different things cost different amounts of money.
Right, but you still need to be spending an industry standard percentage of your budget.
Yeah, and I get asked all the time, what is that percentage? And I have in my mind, what that is, and I'll
We always
just
tell
say,
people, on average, according to Nielsen, on average, standing in place, so maintaining a brand is about 15% of wholesale.
and I would say 15% plus, maybe
Growing
another
the brand, yes.
5% for the retail programs.
And then growing the brand is 20-30% if you're in growth mode.
And this is a different topic, but before you establish your pricing, already know going in that you're going to have to
Right.
budget these things. So don't try to be the cheapest product. One of my pet peeves, honestly, is when I talk to somebody I've never spoken to before, an entrepreneur, and their greatest selling point is that their item's going to cost less than the leading brand.
Yeah, we do
First
the
of all,
same
retailers
thing.
don't want that either. They don't want that either. They don't want to trade
I've
a
had
lot
that
of dollars for less
conversation
dollars.
with, okay, so the purpose behind your brand is you're going to lower a $20 ring for Walmart to a $15 ring for
Yeah,
Walmart.
now why would Walmart want to do that?
That's what makes you different. David, you've got a number of places where people can follow you and learn more from you. How do they do
Yep.
that?
Well, I have a really, really informative website, much more than almost any I've ever seen, other than Jekyll and Hyde's. And so my website is simply myname.com. It's Biernbaum, Biernbaum, Baum.com, or if you can't remember how to spell that,
We'll have links in
consult,
the show notes for it. So just go to the
yeah,
show
or
notes, folks,
consult
and the link
David
will be
B.
there.
The easier one is consult David B.
And you have some big social groups too, though.
Yeah, sure. So on LinkedIn, we have a group that they call them on LinkedIn for consumer products retailers and vendors and third, service providers, a little bit of everybody, and it's real global. Um, and it's on LinkedIn, and it's called Consumer Goods and Retail Professionals, and that'll be on there too to look at.
How
We've
many
got
people are
about
in that now?
103,000 consumer product professional members, with about 50% of them being in the US and the other 50% being very, very globally. Uh, so
That's a huge group.
it really is. And a lot of members really benefit from exchanging ideas and getting referrals. And one of the things that happens more often than I even thought would have been the case is if you are clever enough to talk about your item on there without it looking like you're selling it, just talking about it, interesting news about it, you're going to get responses from buyers at retailers. It happens a lot. One of my favorite experiences was I've been contacted twice by CEOs at Walmart, and they're on there. They're members. They don't write on there very often, although Doug McMillan does. He's the current CEO, which I think is amazing. He writes on there all the time. But most CEOs don't write directly on it, but they're reading it. And then another source that I'm on is retailwire.com. There's about 100 other brain trust members, is what we're called, on there besides me. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe there's 50 more. I don't know. But they're all good. And, I've been in the industry for 40 something years, and so is most of the rest of the brain trust members on there. And I learned more from them than I learned practically from anyone anywhere else, because they all have different areas of expertise. So every day there's 3 retail topics that are posted by the Retail Wire people, and most of us will respond or comment about all 3 of those topics, or 1 or 2 of them. I actually do all 3 or both if they only have 2 almost every single day, and they're all on my website too. I have somebody that posts them every day. So that's another great source, retailwire.com, consultdavidb.com, and on LinkedIn, Consumer Goods and Retail Professionals, and my website. And Jekyll and Hyde's website, don't underestimate that. I look on it all the time. Justin and Mark and his crew, they put a lot of really good information on there that you should follow as often as you can.
Appreciate that, David.
I
And David,
recommend
thanks
that.
for being with us today. Folks, go to the show notes and we'll have links for everything that David just talked about. So don't worry about trying to write it all down while you're listening to it. But if you enjoyed today's show, please go wherever you get your podcast.
And if you're
Leave us
going
a
to
5-star
ECRM,
review.
contact Mark or one of his very able people like Justin at Jekyll and Hyde, and if you want, I'll put you in contact with him.
We're always happy to help. Yep. Always happy to help, folks. That's it for today. David, thanks for being with us, buddy. And folks, if you enjoyed today's show, leave us a 5-star review, and we will see you on the next episode of CPG Insiders. If you're looking to greatly increase sales on your CPG product, don't hesitate to contact us at Jekyll and Hyde Advertising and Marketing. By the way, the only advertising agency with a guaranteed result. Just go to jekyllhydeagency.com or feel free to give us a call at 800-500-4210.